There are moments in life when the world seems to corner you into believing that survival must come through struggle alone. From childhood, many people are taught that their value depends on how hard they labor, how exhausted they become, and how much suffering they can endure just to earn a place in society. They are told to chase opportunities endlessly, to beg life for permission to exist comfortably, to fear lack every waking moment. And because of this belief, millions wake up each morning already defeated in their minds, already convinced that they are separate from abundance, already certain that life is withholding something from them. But I tell you tonight, there is another way to live. There is another law operating behind the scenes of this world. And once you understand it, your entire relationship with money, work, and opportunity will begin to change. The voice of the divine does not say, "Go chase desperately." It says, "Become inwardly what you desire to experience." The world has convinced people that jobs are the source of supply, but jobs are not the source. Businesses are not the source. Employers are not the source. People are not the source. The source of all things flows from consciousness itself. What you consistently assume yourself to be determines the experiences that arrange themselves around you. If a person believes they are unwanted, life reflects rejection. If a person believes they are always struggling, life mirrors hardship. But if a person assumes they are already supported, already prosperous, already secure, then unseen forces begin moving in ways no logical mind can fully explain. This is why so many people spend years searching outside themselves while ignoring the power within themselves. They search endlessly for employment, but never once examine the state of mind they carry every day. They send applications while secretly believing, "Nobody wants me." They attend interviews while inwardly repeating, "I hope I get lucky." They wake up each morning terrified of bills, terrified of failure, terrified of tomorrow. Then they wonder why life continues to give them more reasons to fear. The outer world can only echo the inner world. Reality is not punishing you, it is reflecting you. Understand this clearly. The divine was never asking you to worship employment. The divine never intended for your peace to depend on whether another human being approves of you. The moment you believe a job is your savior, you unconsciously give away your creative power. You begin kneeling before circumstances instead of mastering them. You begin acting as though life exists outside of you instead of through you. And this is where suffering begins. There is nothing wrong with having a job. There is nothing wrong with business, career, or ambition. But the problem arises when people believe those things are the cause of abundance rather than the effect of consciousness. A person who understands the deeper law knows that prosperity can arrive through infinite channels. One opportunity can change everything overnight. One idea can transform an entire lifetime. One assumption held faithfully can rearrange years of struggle into sudden breakthroughs. Life is not limited to human logic unless you believe it is. Think about how often people say, "There are no opportunities," yet another person standing in the same city, under the same economy, somehow rises into wealth, influence, and freedom. Why? Because the difference was never merely external. It was internal. One person identified with limitation while another identified with possibility. One person emotionally accepted lack, while another emotionally accepted abundance before evidence appeared. You must understand that consciousness is always projecting itself outward. Whatever you dominantly feel yourself to be becomes the atmosphere surrounding your life. If you constantly identify as unemployed, desperate, unlucky, and abandoned, then even opportunities that appear before you may somehow slip away because your inner state rejects them. But if you begin identifying yourself as secure, valuable, favored, and guided, your world begins reshaping itself around that assumption. The greatest mistake many people make is looking at present circumstances as final truth. They stare at empty bank accounts and conclude they are poor. They stare at rejection and conclude they are unwanted. They stare at delay and conclude they are forgotten. But the visible world is only the delayed shadow of past assumptions. If you continue reacting emotionally to appearances, you keep recreating the same conditions. The secret is to stop worshipping appearances and start planting new assumptions within yourself. When the divine says, "Do not look for a job," it is not teaching laziness. It is teaching identity. It is saying, stop searching from fear and start creating from certainty. There is a massive difference between action driven by panic and action FL, owing from confidence. One person desperately hunts because they feel empty inside. Another moves calmly because they already feel supported within themselves. The first chases survival. The second expresses expectation. And life responds differently to each. Most people are trying to earn worthiness. But worthiness was never something to earn. It is something to recognize. The moment you realize you are already connected to infinite intelligence, infinite creativity, and infinite supply, fear begins losing its grip over you. You stop seeing yourself as a powerless individual begging the world for scraps. You begin seeing yourself as consciousness itself expressing through human form. Have you ever noticed that opportunities often arrive unexpectedly? Sometimes a person meets someone by accident who changes their life. Sometimes an idea appears suddenly. Sometimes money arrives through channels never anticipated. Sometimes doors open that logic could never predict. This happens because sea life is not mechanical. It is spiritual at its core. Reality responds to states of being more than outward effort alone. A fearful person can work endlessly and still struggle because their inner assumptions poison their results. Meanwhile, another person, calm and confident within themselves, attracts assistance, favor, and openings naturally. This is why inner transformation matters more than outer force. The world calls it coincidence. But deeper understanding recognizes it as correspondence between consciousness and experience. You must stop affirming limitation with your words. Every time you say, "I can't find work," "Nothing ever works out," "I'm unlucky," or "Life is against me," you are impressing those assumptions deeper into yourself. Words spoken with feeling become seeds planted in consciousness. And consciousness always reproduces what is planted within it. Instead, begin claiming a new identity. Say to yourself, "I am always supported. Everything is working in my favor. Unexpected opportunities flow to me. I am valuable. I am guided toward abundance." These are not empty phrases when felt deeply. They are instructions given to consciousness itself. The mind accepts whatever you repeatedly impress upon it emotionally. People underestimate imagination because they have been conditioned to trust only physical evidence. But imagination is the creative power operating behind every invention, every achievement, every transformation in human history. Everything visible was once invisible. Every building existed first as an idea. Every company existed first as a mental image. Every success existed first within consciousness before it appeared physically. So why do people use imagination against themselves? Why imagine failure constantly? Why rehearse fear every night before sleeping? Why mentally replay worst-case scenarios again and again? The subconscious mind does not distinguish between imagined experience and physical experience when emotion is involved. Whatever you repeatedly feel becomes accepted as truth internally, and life begins organizing around it. If you wish to transform your financial reality, stop identifying with struggle. Stop emotionally attaching yourself to lack. Stop introducing yourself inwardly as someone abandoned by life. Instead, assume the feeling of already being provided for. Feel the relief of security now. Feel the gratitude now. Feel the confidence now. Do not wait for the outer world to change first. The outer world changes because the inner world changed. This principle has liberated countless people who once believed they were trapped. Some were drowning in debt. Some had no direction. Some faced rejection after rejection. Yet the moment they stopped defining themselves by appearances and began assuming abundance internally, life began shifting in unexpected ways. New connections appeared. Ideas emerged. Income increased. Doors opened. Not because the universe suddenly became generous, but because their consciousness finally aligned with what they desired. Fear is the true prison. Fear tells you that your survival depends entirely on external systems. Fear tells you there is not enough. Fear tells you that others control your destiny. But divine intelligence within you says otherwise. It says you are capable of creating beyond what the senses currently show. It says life is responding to your assumptions every moment. It says you were never meant to live enslaved to anxiety. Look carefully at the people who radiate confidence. Often, opportunities seem drawn toward them effortlessly. This is not magic in the childish sense. It is the law of consciousness expressed naturally. Their inner state broadcasts certainty, expectation, and value. And because of this, reality reorganizes around them. The world responds differently to those who inwardly expect favor. Do not misunderstand this teaching. You may still take action. You may still apply, create, build, study, or explore opportunities. But the difference is this: you no longer act from desperation. You act from the assumption that life is already supporting you. You move with calm expectation instead of panic. And that change in consciousness alters the results you experience. A desperate mind repels because it vibrates fear. A fulfilled mind attracts because it radiates certainty. Life mirrors inner conviction more faithfully than outward effort alone. This is why some people struggle endlessly while others seem to step naturally into opportunities. The outer difference began inwardly long before it became visible externally. You were never created to live in constant fear of tomorrow. The divine intelligence that beats your heart without effort, that keeps stars suspended in the sky, that grows forests silently without human assistance, is not limited in its ability to provide for you. But you must stop blocking that flow through doubt and negative identification. Faith is not blind belief in something outside yourself. Faith is loyalty to the unseen reality you choose internally despite temporary appearances. Imagine waking each morning already convinced that life is arranging blessings for you. Imagine carrying yourself as someone favored, guided, and protected. Imagine refusing to let temporary circumstances define your identity. That inner shift alone changes your entire energy. Your decisions become clearer. Your intuition becomes sharper. Your interactions change. And slowly, the world begins reflecting the new state you accepted within yourself. The greatest freedom comes when you realize you are not at the mercy of appearances. You are not trapped by current conditions unless you emotionally chain yourself to them. Every moment offers a new opportunity to assume differently. Every moment allows you to choose a new concept of self. The person who says, "I am always struggling," continues the cycle. The person who says, "Life always supports me," begins entering a different reality. Consciousness moves toward whatever identity is emotionally accepted most consistently. So stop bowing before fear. Stop measuring possibilities only through logic. Stop assuming the visible world is permanent. There are forces operating beyond what human senses fully understand. And these forces respond profoundly to belief, assumption, and feeling. You do not need to spend your life begging reality for permission to prosper. You do not need to live terrified that one rejection determines your future. You do not need to worship systems built by human limitation. Your true power begins the moment you realize abundance is first an inner condition before it becomes an outer experience. When you change self-concept, the world eventually has no choice but to mirror it. Hold firmly to the assumption that you are guided, provided for, and valuable. Refuse to identify with fear, no matter what appearances suggest temporarily. Continue inwardly claiming the life you desire until it feels natural within you. Because once it becomes natural internally, reality must eventually conform externally. The divine voice is not telling you to avoid responsibility. It is telling you to stop living as though external conditions are your master. It is reminding you that consciousness comes first, identity comes first, assumption comes first, and the world follows after. So tonight, stop searching from panic. Stop affirming lack. Stop believing you are abandoned. Stand inwardly in the feeling that your life is already unfolding perfectly. Walk as though unseen doors are opening before you now. Speak as though support surrounds you now. Feel gratitude before evidence appears. Because the moment you master the inner state, the outer world begins rearranging itself in ways that once seemed impossible. And one day, you will look back at the period when you were terrified, exhausted, and desperate, and you will realize something astonishing. The breakthrough did not begin when circumstances changed. The breakthrough began the moment you changed the story you accepted about yourself. Most people cannot sustain a new assumption because they are addicted to evidence. They look for immediate confirmation after every affirmation, after every prayer, after every moment of belief. But the deeper law does not operate according to human impatience. Seeds planted beneath the earth do not bloom the same day they are planted, yet nobody digs them up every morning wondering whether growth is occurring. The unseen processes are still unfolding beneath the surface. In the same way, every assumption impressed upon consciousness begins moving into form even when your senses cannot yet detect it. This is where faith becomes powerful. Faith is remaining loyal to the unseen reality you have chosen inwardly, even while the outer world still shows shadows of your former beliefs. Most people quit too early. They return emotionally to fear before their new state has fully hardened into fact. They affirm abundance for 1 hour, then spend the rest of the day complaining about limitation. They imagine success briefly, then immediately react to appearances as though nothing is changing. But consciousness responds to dominance, not occasional wishes. Whatever state you emotionally return to most often becomes your reality. You must become disciplined with your inner conversations. The words spoken silently within yourself throughout the day shape your future more than you realize. Some people speak defeat from sunrise to sunset without noticing it. What if I fail? What if nothing changes? What if I never succeed? These inner whispers become emotional agreements with limitation. And because the subconscious mind accepts repeated feeling as truth, it continues reproducing the same experiences outwardly. Instead, begin listening carefully to the story you tell yourself about your life. Are you secretly identifying as someone overlooked? Are you inwardly convinced that success belongs to others but not to you? Are you carrying assumptions inherited from family, society, or past disappointments? Many people are unconsciously living inside stories they never intentionally chose. They inherited fear from generations before them and accepted it as reality. But the moment you become aware of this, you also become capable of changing it. The world does not force you to remain the same person psychologically. You can choose a new identity right now, not tomorrow, not after circumstances improve, now. You can decide that you are no longer someone abandoned by opportunity. You can decide that life supports you in visible and invisible ways. You can decide that abundance belongs naturally to you. And although the physical world may not instantly reflect it, the transformation has already begun internally. Never underestimate the power of persistence in assumption. The old state may attempt to pull you back through temporary appearances, delays, or moments of doubt. But every great transformation requires loyalty to the unseen before it becomes visible. A person learning to walk falls many times before balance becomes natural. Likewise, a person learning to embody abundance may temporarily struggle with old fears before confidence stabilizes within them. But the key is not perfection. The key is returning repeatedly to the desired state until it becomes familiar. Your mind accepts repetition. Whatever you consistently return to emotionally eventually feels normal. And once a new state feels normal, reality begins expressing it effortlessly. This is why some people suddenly appear to experience miraculous change. To the outside observer, it looks sudden. But internally, that person may have spent weeks, months, or years cultivating a different self-concept before the visible breakthrough appeared. Reality often shifts quietly before it shifts dramatically. Small changes begin unfolding first. New ideas emerge. Confidence increases. Strange coincidences occur. Helpful people appear unexpectedly. Intuition becomes stronger. Then eventually the larger manifestations become undeniable. You are not separate from the intelligence that created this universe. The same creative power flowing through existence flows through your imagination, your assumptions, your awareness. But most people have been taught to distrust their inner world completely. They have been trained to believe only external facts matter. And because of this conditioning, they live reactively instead of creatively. Reactive living means allowing circumstances to dictate your identity. Creative living means deciding your identity first and allowing circumstances to reorganize afterward. One approach keeps people trapped. The other liberates them. There are individuals who lost everything materially and still rebuilt their lives because inwardly they refused to accept defeat as their identity. And there are others who possessed opportunity, yet destroyed them because internally they identified with failure. This proves something profound. Outer conditions alone do not determine destiny. Consciousness shapes how conditions unfold. Do not allow temporary setbacks to hypnotize you into hopelessness. Sometimes life appears to delay your desires only because deeper rearrangements are occurring beyond your awareness. You may think nothing is happening while unseen connections are already forming. A conversation somewhere may already be leading toward your breakthrough. An opportunity may already be approaching you through channels you cannot currently perceive. But fear blinds people to possibilities because fear narrows awareness. A calm mind sees opportunities that an anxious mind overlooks. This is why inner peace matters. When you stop operating from panic, your intuition becomes clearer. You begin recognizing guidance naturally. Ideas arise effortlessly. Actions become inspired instead of forced. You no longer move. I like someone running from disaster. You move like someone expecting favor. An expectation is powerful. Human beings unconsciously move toward what they expect emotionally. If you expect rejection constantly, you interpret life through fear. If you expect support, you notice opportunities more easily. Your emotional assumptions influence perception itself. This is why gratitude can transform a person so quickly. Gratitude shifts attention away from lack and toward fullness. It conditions consciousness to recognize abundance instead of absence. A grateful person is no longer emotionally chained to scarcity because they are already dwelling psychologically in appreciation. And appreciation attracts more experiences to appreciate. Many people say they want prosperity while secretly resenting successful people. They criticize wealth, judge opportunity, or envy others constantly. But resentment blocks alignment. You cannot emotionally condemn what you wish to experience. Bless the succulent you see in others, because what you honor emotionally becomes easier for your subconscious mind to accept for yourself. The divine presence within you is not interested in your suffering. It is interested in your awakening. Suffering often continues only because people cling to fearful identities long after they have the power to release them. They continue introducing themselves inwardly as victims of circumstance rather than creators of experience. But the moment you understand your inner state matters more than appearances, your relationship with life changes forever. You stop fearing temporary conditions because you know they are mutable. You stop worshipping external authority because you recognize the authority within consciousness itself. You stop believing opportunity is scarce because you realize creation is infinite. There are opportunities existing right now beyond your current imagination. There are possibilities your logical mind has not even considered. But if you remain emotionally trapped in limitation, you will not perceive them. Consciousness filters experience according to identity. A person convinced they are powerless overlooks openings that another person would immediately recognize. This is why changing self-concept is the foundation of transformation. You cannot permanently create a prosperous life while inwardly identifying as unworthy. You cannot consistently attract abundance while emotionally rehearsing lack every day. Inner contradiction weakens manifestation. Alignment strengthens it. Begin seeing yourself differently now, not arrogantly, not delusionally, but consciously. See yourself as someone guided by infinite intelligence. See yourself as worthy of beautiful opportunities. See yourself as supported in ways both visible and invisible. Feel that reality emotionally until it begins replacing old fear. And do not become discouraged if old thoughts occasionally return. The mind reflects years of conditioning. Transformation is not about never experiencing doubt again. It is about refusing to build your identity around doubt anymore. Every time fear appears, gently return to the assumption you have chosen. Persist not through strain but through quiet conviction. Your outer world is not fixed. It is fluid, responsive, and constantly shaped by consciousness. People remain trapped because they keep emotionally recycling the same assumptions. Change the assumption, and eventually the experience changes too. So when the world screams at you to panic, remain inwardly steady. When appearances tempt you to feel abandoned, return to trust. When fear tells you there is no way forward, remember that possibilities often exist beyond what logic can currently see. Infinite intelligence is never limited to one path, one person, one opportunity, or one source of income. You are not here merely to survive mechanically from paycheck to paycheck while living in constant anxiety. You are here to awaken to your creative nature. You are here to understand that life responds to consciousness in ways far deeper than society usually teaches. You are here to realize that what you consistently feel yourself to be becomes the blueprint for your experiences. And the moment you truly grasp this, you stop living like a beggar before circumstances. You begin living like a creator aligned with unseen abundance already moving toward you. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire lives asking the world for permission to feel secure. They postpone peace until money arrives. They postpone confidence until success appears. They postpone joy until circumstances improve. But if your emotional state depends entirely upon external conditions, then you become a prisoner of appearances. One bill can steal your peace. One rejection can destroy your confidence. One delay can convince you that life has forgotten you. And this unstable way of living keeps people trapped in cycles of fear for years. The deeper understand. Ing is this: you must generate inwardly what you desire to experience outwardly. Peace first within, then reflected without. Confidence first within, then mirrored externally. Abundance first within consciousness, then expressed physically. The outer world is not the creator, it is the echo. Many people hear this truth, yet still secretly believe that circumstances hold greater power than consciousness. That is why they constantly check appearances for validation. They say they trust, but internally they are watching the clock anxiously, wondering when something will happen. They affirm abundance while emotionally preparing for disappointment. But divided consciousness weakens manifestation, because fear and faith cannot dominate the mind equally at the same time. You must choose which state you will nourish consistently. If you feed fear every day through worry, complaint, and hopeless inner conversations, then fear strengthens its roots within you. But if you repeatedly return to truth, Saturday, gratitude, and expectation, despite appearances, a new psychological atmosphere begins forming inside your consciousness. And once this atmosphere stabilizes, the outer world starts reflecting it naturally. People often ask why some individuals seem blessed wherever they go. Opportunities find them. Support arrives unexpectedly. Doors open effortlessly. Yet another person struggles endlessly despite constant effort. The answer lies deeper than behavior alone. It lies in identity. One person inwardly expects life to work in their favor. The other expects struggle. And reality faithfully mirrors those assumptions. Expectation is one of the most powerful forces in human experience. A person expecting failure unconsciously prepares for it emotionally, mentally, and behaviorally. They hesitate. They doubt themselves. They interpret neutral situations negatively. They close themselves off from possibilities without realizing it. Meanwhile, someone expecting success carries a completely different energy. They notice opportunities faster. They recover from setbacks quicker. They move with confidence instead of fear. And this shift in consciousness changes outcomes dramatically. The world rarely teaches people the importance of self-concept. Society focuses heavily on external strategies while ignoring the inner identity producing results. Yet two people can follow the same actions while receiving completely different outcomes because consciousness influences every interaction invisibly. You carry an atmosphere around you created by your dominant assumptions. Some people radiate defeat before speaking a single word because inwardly they have already accepted limitation. Others radiate calm certainty because internally they assume support and success naturally belong to them. This invisible atmosphere influences relationships, opportunities, conversations, and experiences constantly. That is why you must become careful about the identities you emotionally rehearse. If you continuously tell yourself, life is hard, nothing ever changes, or I always struggle, those assumptions harden into psychological facts within you. And once something feels psychologically true, the subconscious mind organizes behavior and perception around it automatically. But imagine waking every day with a different inner declaration. Imagine beginning each morning by reminding yourself, everything is unfolding for my benefit. I am guided toward the right opportunities. Unexpected favor surrounds me. Abundance flows toward me naturally. At first, the old mind may resist these assumptions because they contradict years of conditioning. But persistence reshapes consciousness. The subconscious mind learns through repetition and feeling. What you repeatedly feel yourself to be becomes familiar. And familiarity eventually becomes reality expressed outwardly. This is why you must persist even when appearances temporarily remain unchanged. Your work is not to force reality mechanically. Your work is to stabilize the desired state within yourself until it feels natural. Most people quit because they expect immediate physical evidence before inner transformation has matured. They plant a seed mentally, then uproot it through doubt the next day. But creation requires emotional consistency. You cannot constantly dig up your assumptions to check whether they are working. Trust allows the unseen process to unfold. There are moments when life may appear completely motionless outwardly, while enormous rearrangements are taking place invisibly. Human beings judge too quickly because they can only see fragments of reality at a time. They assume delay means denial. They assume silence means abandonment. But often the unseen movement is already occurring beyond the reach of their senses. Think about how many times life surprised you unexpectedly. Opportunities appeared suddenly. Situations changed rapidly. Problems resolved themselves in ways you never predicted. Ted, these moments reveal something important. Reality is more fluid than people believe. What seems impossible today can transform quickly when consciousness shifts. Fear keeps people trapped because fear worships present appearances as permanent truth. Fear says, this situation will never change. Fear says, there is no way forward. Fear says, you are alone. But consciousness itself is creative and dynamic. The moment identity changes internally, the future begins changing with it. Do not underestimate the importance of emotional discipline. Every day you are either reinforcing limitation or reinforcing possibility within yourself. Every reaction matters. Every inner conversation matters. Every assumption matters. People think manifestation is only about occasional visualization or affirmation, but it is actually about the dominant emotional atmosphere you live in daily. If you spend most of your time worried, resentful, hopeless, and fearful, those emotions become instructio, ends impressed upon the subconscious mind. But if you deliberately cultivate gratitude, confidence, expectancy, and inner peace, you begin sending entirely different instructions into consciousness. And eventually, reality responds. Not always instantly, not always predictably, but inevitably. The person who persists in the assumption of abundance eventually begins noticing shifts. Perhaps an idea arrives that changes everything. Perhaps someone unexpectedly offers assistance. Perhaps a hidden opportunity appears at the perfect moment. Perhaps an entirely new direction opens that never existed before. Life has infinite pathways available, but consciousness determines which pathways become visible to you. The divine intelligence within existence is not limited by economic conditions, human systems, or current appearances. Human beings create limitations mentally, then live imprisoned by those limitations emotionally. But infinite intelligence operates beyond human fear. It can create openings where none seem visible. It can arrange circumstances beyond logical expectation. It can guide people toward opportunities they never planned. This is why inner trust matters more than external panic. Panic clouds perception. Panic weakens intuition. Panic causes people to act from desperation instead of alignment. But trust opens awareness. Trust sharpens perception. Trust allows inspired action to emerge naturally. There is a profound difference between forcing life and allowing life. Forcing comes from fear that nothing will happen unless you exhaust yourself completely. Allowing comes from confidence that unseen forces are already moving in your favor. And strangely enough, those who trust deeply often experience smoother pathways than those who operate entirely from anxiety. You were never meant to live disconnected from your creative power. You were never meant to believe that survival depends solely upon exhausting struggle. You were never meant to spend your life oceanally enslaved to appearances. The deeper truth is that consciousness precedes experience. Identity precedes manifestation. Assumption precedes reality. So when fear arises, do not bow before it. Observe it without accepting it as truth. Return inwardly to the state you desire. Return to the feeling of security. Return to gratitude. Return to expectancy. Continue doing this until the new state becomes more natural than the old one. And as this happens, your outer world will begin responding in ways that once seemed impossible to you. Because life is always reflecting the consciousness you consistently occupy, whether you realize it or not. The person who understands this no longer lives like someone abandoned in a hostile universe. They begin living with quiet certainty that unseen support surrounds them continually. They stop chasing worthiness because they recognize worthiness already exists within them. They stop identifying with lack because they know abundance begins in connection. Consciousness first. And from that transformed inner state, entirely new realities begin to emerge. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must decide whether they will continue living as a servant to appearances or awaken as the operant power within their own experience. Most never reach this realization because they remain hypnotized by the visible world. They believe what they see must determine what they feel. So if circumstances appear unstable, they become unstable emotionally. If opportunities seem absent, they accept hopelessness inwardly. If the world delays their desires, they conclude failure is inevitable. And without realizing it, they continuously surrender their creative authority to temporary conditions. But the awakened mind understands something different. It understands that appearances are not permanent truths. They are effects, shadows, reflections of previously occupied states of consciousness. Once you truly understand this, fear begins losing its power over you because you realize the visible world is not fixed. It is responsive. Imagine standing before a mirror while frowning and demanding the reflection smile first before you do. That would seem absurd. Yet this is exactly how many people approach life. They wait for reality to change before changing themselves inwardly. They say, once I have money, I will feel secure. Once I succeed, I will feel confident. Once opportunity appears, I will trust life. But the deeper law works in reverse. You must embody inwardly what you desire outwardly before the reflection changes. This is why the inner world matters so profoundly. The imagination is not fantasy separated from reality. It is the spiritual blueprint from which reality is shaped. Every invention, every empire, every transformation in human history existed first as an invisible assumption held within consciousness. Human beings constantly underestimate the creative power of inner experience because society trains them to worship external evidence instead. And because of this conditioning, people become trapped in repetitive cycles. They wake up each morning expecting the same disappointments, rehearsing the same fears, carrying the same emotional identities. Then they wonder why nothing changes. But life cannot consistently mirror a new reality while you continue emotionally identifying with the old one. Transformation begins the moment you stop emotionally agreeing with limitation. You may still see temporary evidence of struggle around you, but inwardly you no longer define yourself by it. You begin holding a different vision of yourself mentally and emotionally. You begin seeing yourself as supported, capable, guided, prosperous, and favored by life itself. At first, this may feel unnatural because the old identity has been practiced for years. Many people have rehearsed fear for so long that peace feels unfamiliar. They have rehearsed failure so consistently that success feels unbelievable. But familiarity is not truth. Familiarity is simply repetition. And anything repeatedly impressed upon consciousness eventually feels normal. This means you can deliberately normalize a new identity within yourself. You can practice feeling secure until security becomes emotionally familiar. You can practice expecting opportunities until expectancy becomes natural. You can practice gratitude until abundance feels real within you before physical evidence appears. And this inner shift changes everything, because the world responds not only to actions, but to the consciousness behind actions. Two people may perform identical behaviors outwardly while carrying completely different assumptions inwardly. One acts from desperation. The other acts from certainty. One feels rejected before even beginning. The other feels chosen already. And those inner states influence results in ways most people never consciously notice. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed confidence or insecurity in someone before they spoke much at all? That invisible atmosphere comes from identity. Human beings constantly project their dominant assumptions energetically through posture, tone, emotion, and behavior. Reality responds to this atmosphere continuously. A person inwardly convinced they are unlucky often unconsciously sabotages opportunities because their identity rejects success as unnatural. Another person who feels deserving and supported naturally moves toward possibilities with openness and confidence. The difference is not merely talent or intelligence. It is self-concept. This is why changing your concept of self is more important than obsessing over circumstances. Circumstances are effects. Self-concept is cause. When self-concept changes deeply enough, behavior, perception, decisions, and experiences begin changing automatically. Most people try to force outer change while leaving inner identity untouched. But this creates conflict. If inwardly you still feel powerless, no amount of temporary external success will satisfy you because consciousness eventually recreates experiences matching your dominant state. That is why some people repeatedly lose opportunities, relationships, or wealth despite obtaining them temporarily. Their internal identity never changed. But when identity changes genuinely, outer transformation becomes sustainable because the new experiences now match the inner state. Prosperity feels natural. Success feels safe. Opportunity feels expected. Abundance no longer feels foreign or temporary. You must stop seeing yourself as someone waiting to be rescued by circumstances. The divine presence within you is not powerless. It is creative. Infinite intelligence did not create you merely to suffer endlessly beneath fear and limitation. But you must cooperate with this creative power consciously rather than contradicting it constantly through negative assumptions. Every time you say, "Nothing ever works out for me," you enforce a state. Every time you complain habitually, you deepen identification with lack. Every time you rehearse fear mentally, you nourish the very reality you wish to escape. Consciousness accepts repeated emotional impressions faithfully. But imagine if you reverse this process deliberately. Imagine if you spent each day affirming support instead of fear. Imagine if you mentally rehearsed success instead of failure. Imagine if you expected life to help you rather than harm you. At first, the old mind may resist, but persistence rewires identity over time. The subconscious mind is deeply impressionable. It learns through emotion, repetition, and imagery. This is why what you dwell upon consistently matters so much. You become psychologically shaped by your dominant focus. A person dwelling constantly on limitation strengthens limitation internally. A person dwelling on possibility strengthens possibility. And eventually, outer experiences begin corresponding accordingly. There are people who received opportunities they never could have logically predicted. There are people whose entire lives changed through one encounter, one idea, one unexpected event. This proves that reality is not nearly as rigid as fear suggests. Infinite pathways exist beyond current appearances. But fear narrows perception so severely that people stop noticing possibilities around them. Fear causes tunnel vision. It convinces individuals that their present condition defines their permanent future. Yet history is filled with stories of people whose circumstances transformed completely once their inner state changed. You must refuse to let temporary appearances define your identity anymore. A temporary lack of results does not mean lack is your destiny. A delay does not mean abandonment. Rejection does not mean unworthiness. These are experiences, not identities. And experiences change when consciousness changes. There is enormous power in emotional detachment from appearances. This does not mean denial. It means refusing to emotionally surrender to temporary conditions. It means understanding that visible reality is still catching up to inner transformation. It means remaining loyal to the unseen assumption you have accepted within yourself even before physical confirmation arrives. Most people abandon their assumptions too quickly because they become discouraged by temporary contradictions. But the person who persists calmly eventually witnesses reality conform. The bridge of events may unfold gradually or suddenly. But once consciousness accepts a new state deeply enough, corresponding experiences begin appearing naturally. Do not spend your days obsessing over how things will happen. The logical mind often cannot predict the pathways through which life unfolds. Your responsibility is not to control every detail mechanically. Your responsibility is to maintain alignment with the state you desire internally. Feel supported now. Feel secure now. Feel favored now. Feel abundant now. Not because the outer world has fully changed yet, but because consciousness creates from identity first. The moment you stop emotionally begging circumstances for permission to believe in yourself, you reclaim your creative authority. You stop living reactively and begin living intentionally. You stop fearing the future because you recognize that your inner state is already shaping it. And slowly, almost mysteriously at times, the outer world begins reorganizing itself around the new person you have become inwardly. The mind of fear always asks, "But what if nothing happens?" It constantly searches for reasons to doubt, reasons to delay trust, reasons to remain emotionally attached to struggle. Fear survives by convincing people that the visible world has ultimate authority. It tells them that circumstances are fixed, that opportunities are scarce, that they must endlessly fight life just to survive. And because most people believe these thoughts without questioning them, they unknowingly continue creating experiences that match the same fearful assumptions. But there is another voice within you, quieter yet infinitely more powerful. It does not scream panic. It does not demand desperation. It simply reminds you that creation begins inwardly. It reminds you that your awareness is not weak. It reminds you that unseen realities often precede visible manifestations. This voice speaks through intuition, through imagination, through moments of deep inner knowing that logic alone cannot explain. Many people silence this voice because they have been conditioned to trust fear more than faith. They have spent years studying limitation, discussing limitation, expecting limitation, and emotionally preparing for disappointment. They have become experts in struggle while remaining strangers to possibility. Yet possibility has always existed around them. Infinite potential has always surrounded them. The problem was never absence of opportunity. The problem was identification with limitation. Identity shapes perception. A person who sees themselves as powerless interprets life differently from someone who sees themselves as guided and capable. The powerless mind notices obstacles first. The empowered mind notices openings first. The fearful mind expects rejection. The confident mind expects alignment. And because expectation influences behavior, energy, and awareness, reality begins mirroring these assumptions outwardly. This is why two people can stand before the exact same situation and experience completely different outcomes. One sees impossibility while another sees potential. One retreats inwardly before even beginning, while another moves forward with expectancy. The difference originates within consciousness long before external results appear. You must become aware of the emotional habits you practice daily. Many people unconsciously rehearse defeat every morning. Before even leaving bed, they begin worrying about LLS, fearing failure, anticipating stress, and replaying old disappointments mentally. Then they carry this atmosphere throughout the day and wonder why life continues reflecting anxiety back to them. Your emotional state is not separate from your experiences. It is part of the creative process itself. Thoughts repeated with feeling impress the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind influences perception, behavior, intuition, reactions, and even the kinds of opportunities you recognize or overlook. If you repeatedly feel unsupported, you unconsciously align with experiences that reinforce that belief. But if you begin consistently feeling guided and supported, entirely different patterns start emerging in your life. This is not superstition. It is the psychological and spiritual law of assumption unfolding continuously. People often underestimate the power of inner expectation because they cannot physically see it working immediately. But invisible processes govern much of XZ. Sentence already. You cannot see the roots of a tree growing beneath the ground, yet they determine the strength of the visible structure eventually rising above the surface. Likewise, assumptions rooted deeply in consciousness eventually produce visible experiences, whether positive or negative. This is why guarding your inner world matters so much. You cannot afford to spend every day feeding fear while hoping for abundance. You cannot continuously affirm limitation internally while expecting freedom externally. The subconscious mind responds to dominant emotional impressions, not occasional wishes. There are individuals who constantly say they desire prosperity, yet inwardly they feel guilty about wealth, suspicious of success, or convinced that struggle defines virtue. These hidden assumptions create inner resistance. Consciousness cannot fully express abundance through a mind emotionally attached to limitation. You must become willing to release old identities completely, not temporarily, not halfway, fully. Release the identity of being overlooked. Release the identity of always struggling. Release the identity of being unlucky or unsupported. These identities may feel familiar, but they are not your true nature. They are conditioned states maintained through repetition. And anything maintained through repetition can be replaced through repetition. This is why persistence matters. Every day you are either strengthening the old identity or strengthening the new one. Every moment you return to faith, instead of fear, you weaken the old pattern slightly. Every time you affirm support instead of lack, you nourish a new state within yourself. And eventually, the new identity becomes more natural than the old one ever was. The world then begins responding differently because you are no longer broadcasting the same assumptions energetically. Your posture changes, your speech changes, your decisions change, your intuition sharpens. You begin acting less from dispara, tion, and more from expectation. And opportunities that once seemed invisible suddenly become noticeable. Life often appears magical when consciousness changes because the outer shifts can happen rapidly once the inner state stabilizes. Someone may unexpectedly mention an opportunity. An idea may emerge that transforms your direction completely. A connection may appear that changes everything. These moments seem accidental to the logical mind, but deeper understanding recognizes them as bridges leading from one state of consciousness into another. You do not need to force every detail of your future manually. Infinite intelligence already understands pathways your logical mind cannot currently perceive. Your responsibility is to remain aligned inwardly with the reality you desire. Trust does not mean inactivity. It means acting without fear dominating your consciousness. A fearful action and a faithful action may look identical externally, yet they produce different experiences because